Hi,
Hi,
here's Nejan and me again.
and today we will talk about the dentin autograft. It is interesting because you always want to talk about the principles and not specific materials.
Yes, you are right, but dentin autograft makes a difference. I simply feel obligation, a moral obligation to spread the word. And I want to emphasize right on the beginning that we are not sponsored by any company. I keep refusing any sponsorship because I want to feel free and to be trusted. Dentin is such a good grafting material. I deeply believe that this is a shame to throw the patient's own teeth away.
It sounds like dentin graft is your favorite grafting material.
Yes, but it's also the different indications require a different grafting materials, and different grafts give different results. And we should understand how graft works in order to achieve a predictable results.
So, what are the key properties that you consider when choosing a graft material?
I really want to have a strong scaffold because I want to maintain the rich dimensions. Then, of course, it would be great if the material would be osteoinductive, and very, very few materials do have these properties. And dentin graft has these properties. Autogenous bone, of course, does have. This is but why we say that autogenous bone is a gold standard. It is this scaffold properties. They are connected with the slow resorption and turnover of the material. I want to have material that maintains the rich contours until we have a good lamellar bone built. I prefer autogenous materials because there is no immunological reaction to the material because it is the autogenous material. I would prefer grafting material that has low costs.
When you talk about the dentin graft, about these futures, like long-term over time, you refer to the non-demineralized dentin graft. Can you clear it out a little bit more?
Yes, there is a lot of confusion out there with mineralized, demineralized, partially demineralized dentin autograft. I was confused too a few years ago when I started with dentin graft. I've seen posts on Dental XP forum from Professor Dong Son, and he uses demineralized dentin graft. Then I have done some Google research looking where I can buy this machine, and I read a lot of papers, really convincing studies. I wanted to have it, but somehow I couldn't find some distributor around here. And then I asked my students to take a look. And the students, they are lazy. And they came the day after and told to me, it's very, very complicated with this machine to produce a demineralized dentin autograft. It is very expensive, and there are not distributors here around the corner. But we have found something different. It's also dentin grafting material. It is something, it looks like a coffee machine, and it almost costs like a coffee machine. It is machine that grinds the teeth in the small dentin particles, and it looks really good. And there are also distributors around here. I was skeptical, and then exchanged some emails with CEO of the company. And after a few emails, it was actually too much to him. He connected me with the Professor Bindemann, who actually is inventor of this machine and of this idea. Somehow I felt it's going to be encapsulated with the fibrous tissue like xenograft particles and never resorbed. He convinced me in his emails that this that these dentin particles are going to be resorbed and replaced by a native bone with the time, but it is very important to have this slow turnover because the lamellar bone has a time to be built inside the socket, and at the same time the ridge dimensions are going to be maintained. So, and he convinced me, and I started to utilize mineralized, or let's say non-demineralized dentin autograft. Afterwards, I read a very interesting study comparing non-demineralized, demineralized, and partially demineralized dentin autograft, and concluded that partially demineralized dentin graft actually combines the good features of non-demineralized and demineralized. Since the collagen is exposed, the growth factors are released faster. So there is a faster reaction of the surrounding tissue and bone remodeling. But since the material is not completely demineralized, it has a good scaffold properties and maintains the ridge dimensions. So I started with partially demineralized.
Okay, but Professor Bindeman convinced you that it will become resorbed. But if I think of it, I look at it, it's okay, grinded into that coffee machine. We get those particles that are like mineralized, really hard, and for me looking like some kind of crystals. I think that it will take ages, or I don't know, centuries for it to become resorbed.
What takes centuries, it would be the true for enamel. And enamel we don't utilize for each indication. But dentin and cementum, they really get eventually resolved and replaced by the bone, and it doesn't take ages, it takes a few months. After 3 or 4 months, and these are nice independently from each other published papers, one from Ziv Mazer, Bob Horowitz, Kotsakis, showing that 3-4 months after dentin grafting, there are let's say a lot of particles still there, but after 7 to 8 months, very few of them. And the same or very similar research published by Nelson Pinto. And there is one study showing that 24 months, it means 2 years after the socket grafting, there are not dentin particles anymore to be seen in histologies. All is replaced by the native bone.
So you mentioned that the bone and dentin have the same osteoinduction properties.
Similar.
Similar, okay. So we can correlate then those two grafting materials and say that all of them contain organic material, anorganic material, or body fluids, but they a little bit are different in percentage of each. So adular bone has a little bit more of organic material like collagen. Anorganic material there is more in dentin, and body fluid bone contains more body fluid.
A little bit more,
Little
yes.
bit more.
And both of these materials do contain growth factors. And this is also a very interesting paper showing that the centuries, and this is what takes centuries, for the growth factors to disappear from dentin. It seems they don't disappear at all. It is on ancient teeth, the growth factors were found. And these very important growth factors like BMP, bone morphogenic protein, like insulin-like growth factor, like transforming growth factor, and they play a major role in bone promoting.
And when we use extracted to the dentin particles, there is a huge maintenance of alveolar ridge dimension that was concluded in a radiographic cone beam computed tomographic study, wasn't it?
You are talking about my study.
Yes.
This is a study, yes, that I published together with Professor Binderman and Jelena Tomac. She's from Histology Department of Rijeka University. Actually, we followed 56 sockets type 1 grafted with dentin graft, and we let's do CBCT superimposition. Was done by independently researcher in Cairo University. What we have found, it is that in average, there was a horizontal bone resorption 0.8 millimeter. It means that only actually the buccal bundle bone was resorbed. There is no grafting material that can maintain the buccal bundle bone. It's only partial extraction therapy. We talked about it in previous podcast. But we really only 0.8 millimeter horizontal ridge resorption. This is rather good and interesting. We gained, or the sockets or gained a little bit, but gained. They have not lose in average in the vertical dimension.
After that study, not using dentin graft, come on.
Yes, really, it is really, I really think it is shame to throw away the patient's own teeth.
Does it need membrane coverage?
You mean post-extraction sockets grafted with dentin? No, membrane coverage is not required. Of course, one can use membranes. Some authors have published papers where the membranes were utilized, but it is not necessary. In this study, in 56 sockets, no membranes were utilized, only a PRF membrane or a collagen, a very, very cheap collagen sponge to contain this grafting material, just to prevent it from exfoliating. No membrane is required and no primary closure. The primary closure is very important because there is no need to do a coronal advancement of the buccal flap. It means no flap elevation, no trigger for the bone resorption. It means no periosteum releasing incision. It means less trauma for the patient and less bone resorption. And no membrane, it means less risk of the membrane exposure, inflammatory response, and it's also savings. It saves the money if you don't need the membrane.
What would you say that the indications would be for the dentin graft?
Actually, I utilize it for all indications. It is all indications that require bone, hard tissue, grafting,
let's
augmentation,
sinus lift,
lateral ridge augmentation, horizontal ridge augmentation, socket preservation, periodontal defects. I recently re-entered a great case with deep pockets. I have done in few cases, but this is really nice, documented, showing both radiologically and clinically very, very nice. Is it repair or regeneration? One would need histology to show it. I told you I use it for all these indications, but the only difference is if we utilize the enamel from the tooth or not. You know, when I use a dentin to grab the gap for immediately post-extraction placed implants, then I prefer it without enamel because enamel doesn't get resolved. But when I'm doing veneer grafting for the horizontal ridge augmentation, of course I do want
scaffold.
I want a scaffold.
So there are a lot of teeth that, of course, they have root canal fillings, and because of it is not good. Yes, gutta-perca, and we can't use them for anything. So how do you resolve?
We still can use this teeth, and we simply, I mean, we are too lazy to do it, at least in my clinic, in our clinic, to do it for teeth with 3 roots and 4 or 5 canals, root canals. But it is like incisor, canine, premolar tooth. It is really easy just to go with the Lindemann drill and to remove this root canal content, and we can still use the tooth. It is also very, very often that patients have retained or half impacted wisdom teeth that can be utilized. There are very, very often, not always dentin graft is available, but in majority of cases it is available.
And how does the processing look like? Does it take long?
Yes,
because I imagine that it's easier to take the artificial material from the bottle, and
it is easier. It is easier to take artificial material from the bottle and to put it, but it's easier actually at the end to take a dentin. Why? Because for any kind of artificial material, if it's allograft or xenograft or synthetic, you have a patient needs to sign a consensus, and then the patients ask a lot of questions if it's xenograft, especially if it's allograft, and it can take a lot of time, even more time than to process tooth into the dentin graft. It is with dentin graft, the part that I dislike is the mechanical tooth cleaning. When the tooth is taken out, the fillings must be taken out, concrements from the tooth, and the periodontal ligament, yes. And then it's very, very fast. The ground process takes 30 seconds, and then the particles are placed for 5 minutes into the cleanser. And then I do partially demineralization. It takes additionally 2 minutes, and the particles are washed twice with a buffered saline and dried, and it is everything. It means mechanical tooth clinic plus 7, 8 to 10 minutes, and it is exactly the time that I need to do some cleaning of the periapical areas, or to accomplish something others at this patient. What I also dislike is that the machine is loud, but I don't have it in the treatment room.
So I see that even though you're it's like money saving, but it's a time saving, because
actually it is money saving and time saving.
Grinded, you are doing the debridement or something.
Yes. And assistance is doing tooth cleaning and grinding, and yes.
So can't you use like a coffee machine or a hammer or whatever to save the money? I've seen that stuff on Facebook.
Yes, you can see that stuff on Facebook, even some studies done. I really don't know why they don't use a dentin grinder, a proper machine, but a hammer to particulate the tooth. Coffee machine, it is cheaper, but you don't have a sterile chamber for each patient. It must be sterile chamber for each patient. And you don't have a particle size that you have. There is a science showing which particle size is the optimal. It is between 300 micrometer and 1200 micrometer. And you have it with this dentin grinder. And dentin grinder, it costs, I don't know now exactly, about 1,200 or 300 euro. I'm not sure. But it is, it is one's investment. And then for each patient, you spend about 50 or 60 euros.
For the chamber.
Yes, for the sterile chamber. And even if it's one tooth, it is okay. It is really good compared to the other biomaterials. But very often, these are full arch cases, periodontal patients, and it is the cost for dentin grinder, it's really not that much.
Let's say if I have a wisdom tooth and but I don't need it yet, maybe in the future, yes. But can I store that tooth?
Yeah.
Can I store it even in the particles? Even if you do for a patient and you get a lot of particles, can you store it?
Yes, yes, it is very easy. Good question. It is easy. Let's say I'm doing upper jaw full arch and the patient is scheduled for the low arch. And, from each tooth, after the tooth is ground into the particles, we have 3 times a volume. It means that is sufficient, one tooth is sufficient to graft 2 or 3 sockets. So I don't need all this teeth. And when the teeth are already ground, give it to the patient with the name on it. Or if the patient is not sure if he's going to have an implant placed and is not ready to pay for the socket preservation or ridge augmentation, just clean and dry the tooth and give it to the patient. And I can tell you a story from a patient that came to me. They Googled me. They came from Zagreb, from city about 200 kilometers away. They, patient and his mother, he was in orthodontic treatment, and the orthodontics have not succeeded in moving his retained canine. So oral surgeon has taken it out, and the patient ends with a huge defect in the area of the canine, but also the lateral incisor. The lateral incisor is mobile, the bone is resorbed, and they came then for the consultation to me. And before they came, as I already told you, they Googled me and they found out that I'm like Robin Hood, utilizing autogenous tissue, also dentin grafting material. And the patient and his mother, they are really mad. Why? Not because this story with the retained canine, but because 1 week because the patient came to me, they got his wisdom teeth taken out, and they have not storage the wisdom teeth, they have thrown them away. So now we don't have this material to be utilized for it. So it is a protocol that takes 7, 8 to 10 minutes to have it, and it can be storage endlessly.
So from that story, I assume that patients have a good reaction on it. So are they all of them so enthusiastic, or some of them are skeptical? maybe they find that those words renewable, organic, local, sustainable, fashionable, so they love it.
They simply love it. They simply love it. I've never met a patient that didn't like this idea immediately, instantly, independently of the educational or social background. They simply love it. They also understand that there is no risk of disease transmission, and it's really at the end they see that there is almost no inflammation. Really, we are many dentin graft users, and we exchange our cases and experiences, and we don't see inflammation. We don't see inflammation and complications after dentin grafting. I mean, it doesn't sound good. You know, we are now doing a podcast, and it's like I'm selling a dentin grafting material and telling it we don't see complications and inflammations, but we really don't see inflammation and complications. Really not. You can see complications only if the protocol is not followed.
What if patient maybe think that you want to save the money with it, or you don't want to spend money on them?
What's wrong about saving the money, saving the patient's money, and saving our money? Nothing wrong with it. But you're right, they could think in this direction, and it is so much depends on communication. But as I told you, I have utilized it in hundreds of the patients, and the feedback was always great.
Sometimes the patients are less resistant to something new than the clinicians are.
Very often. This is what I also see with partial extraction therapy. It is, if it's explained, some of them, or almost many, let's say a few of them, they ask me, oh, this is new. It wasn't done before, like leaving a socket shield, because the patients, they are familiar with the general surgery, and surgeon doesn't take the entire organ if only a part of it is diseased. Yes. And I think the patients, they get more and more educated, and it can also be then, like the patient became aware of the stem cells from the umbilical cord, that may be very soon asking, calling the dental office, doing an appointment and asking, do you utilize the teeth for the socket, not for socket augmentation, but as grafting material. Yes.
Yes. Fingers crossed for that.
Fingers crossed for that. So, see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.